Cool. So let's talk a little bit about the history of BI. So BI is business intelligence for those of you that are brand new to the field. Um, where did it all start and sort of where are we now and what are Microsoft sort of thinking for the future? This is a really common slide. It took me like this slide has been in the Microsoft pack for since Power BI came out basically. And I don't think I ever fully understood it until probably 6 to 8 months ago, like understanding what they mean when they say what they're trying to do, and then understanding that some of this is kind of aspirational and that kind of stuff. So the first wave of BI what we call corporate BI, and this is the BI that I sort of grew up on, right? In my experience as an enterprise sort of support person and the BI team was always like the least popular team in IT. The reason why is because they're always hugely busy. Their tools are really clunky. They took forever to do anything. And the business had 10,000 questions that they couldn't answer, right? And so the first wave where corporate BI it means that this idea where IT ran all of the business intelligence function. It's completely 100% reliant on IT to come up with all your reports, which means that basically the developers, the person that wrote the program, are also writing all the reports, right? And so you would have to go back to the developers, or you have to go back to a specialized IT team and say, hey, I need a new report. And they would, punch your ticket and say, yep, we'll eventually get to that. And 6 months later, you get a report and it's wrong. And then you have to go back and so this first wave of BI, and some people are still in this space. Like it's not uncommon to see people that have a dedicated just IT that do BI team, right? And the problem with this approach is that you can only support so many requests, right? There's only so much capacity you can add into a BI team to be able to do that. And so typically what these guys do is that they handle the core function of the business. So they might handle like core finance and executive reporting, and that's about it, right? That's all they're going to be able to um, they're going to be able to support because there's only so many requests. If you think about the size of this mountain, right? This is the number of requests these guys can support, right? They can support up to here, but the problem is that the business has 10,000 more questions. And what about the operations team? What about the sales team? And what about IT? So when I worked in IT, and we had a corporate BI team, and I wanted information, I would never go to the BI team. Even though I'm in IT, I know them. They sit down the road, right? I could just go and talk to them and I could get them to build me stuff. Why didn't I go to them? Because they were already completely swamped with work. They already had too much to do. And so for me to come in and say, hey, I want to know how many people on the service desk, closed tickets last week, that was just like, yeah, we'll get to it. Never, like you're never going to be able to support all of the possible questions the business can ask. So even though this is like a highly controlled environment and you've got people that sort of know what they're doing, those people don't have the capacity to be able to answer the questions that everybody could possibly ask about your business, which means your business isn't agile enough, right? And other businesses are going to overtake them because they are able to answer those questions quickly if they've got a really good data culture inside their organization or whatever. So to solve this, the second wave of BI came along, and they call this self-service BI, and you hear this a lot. Now, for a lot of companies, this is the aspirational sort of peak for people, is they're like, yeah, what we'll do is we'll have specific analysts who sit inside BI teams, and those specific analysts they know the business, because one of the problems with the corporate BI is that the IT guys, they don't know the business. They don't know what the business does. They don't care. But what they care about is whether the server's working and whether their software's got bugs and all that kind of stuff. The analyst then knows the business, right? Because they're close to the business. They might work closely with with an executive or whatever. So you've got this specialized reporting person who lives inside the business team. Perfect. And so in self-service BI, that person is going to be, so IT is going to serve up a bunch of semantic models to that person, and then they're going to build the reports for the executives, and that's going to solve all of the world's issues. And so they went down this road. And this is sort of early 2000s. You had a lot of self-service BI tools come out, and things like Cubes and Cognos and SSAS and all this kind of stuff sort of evolved into creating this idea of self-service BI, and stuff was built into Excel and all the rest of it. The problem with this is that it turns out that there's a couple of problems. One of them is that the volume of requests is still greater than that. So even though you have these analysts inside your business, that actually those analysts, there's only so much that they can handle, and that there's even more data that people need. But really, the true problem is that even though the analyst knows the business, they can't get inside the heads of the executives that ask them the questions, right? And so what happens is an exec person or a manager or somebody goes to an analyst, because these analysts, they tend to sort of, there's only one for every X number of people, right? So you've got one analyst who maybe looks after the sales department, right? But maybe you've got 7 sales managers, and one of them wants to look at their data one way, and one of them wants to look at the other data the other way, and one of them wants to look at the data the other way. And so what happens is the analyst builds one sort of generic model or something like that. It's just an extension of the corporate BI problem. But one sales manager doesn't like that way. They want to look at it in their own way because they're a special, unique snowflake or whatever. The problem with this idea is that even though they understand the business better, they still can't service people's requests, because it turns out that the way that people want to look at data is kind of their own unique way. The way that people interpret data is really subjective. The way that people sort of understand information, and the way that they think about information is different for every person. And so these people who are in sort of executive or management positions, they need to be able to make business decisions in the way that suits them best to make the best possible decision for themselves. And so there's still this tension between analysts and executives. And the other thing that happens is the analyst gets caught up in executive politics, right? Executive 1 is having an argument with Executive 2 because he's saying, hey, I'm the operations manager and your sales department is, terrible, and here's my data to support that. And then sales manager is like, hey, no, it's because your operations department is terrible, and I have data to support that. And they go back to the analyst and say, hey, analyst, give me a report that shows me this narrative. And then operations guy comes back and says, hey, give me a report that shows me this narrative. And then when it turns out that those two things don't line up entirely, well, executive 1 and executive 2 don't understand the source of the data, right? All they understand is they got the report from the analyst. So who do they blame? The analyst, right? So the analyst gets caught up in this back and forth between people saying, no, my data's wrong, your data's right, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to, so Microsoft's solution for this, and there's other technology companies obviously looking to solve this issue as well, but this is a day-to-day, it's a current problem with the current way that BI is set up right now, is that most organizations haven't even gotten to self-service BI, and those who have are still having problems. And Microsoft have said, well, the reason why is because we need to have a third wave. We need to empower everybody. Satya's thing is to empower every person to do better every day, right? And so that way, the only way to do this is to empower each of those 2 organizational managers to do their own data, which means everybody has access to data. And so then IT's job in this space becomes then to serve up that data, to organize governance over the data, to curate data sets for people. And then the analyst's job is to then, potentially build semantic models and to, organize the data. They know a little bit more about the data, but then everybody can build, change the color of their graph and, put a heat map on something and do all that visualization piece, that sort of droll end user piece that actually the analysts and the IT people aren't that interested in doing anyway, because it's kind of boring and not their core business. So theoretically speaking, the third wave is the way to go. But like I said, this is partially aspirational. Like a lot of this, and we're 5 years into Power BI, and we don't see many organizations that have quite got it to the point where everybody in the organization uses data effectively, even though we have the tools now to do it, right? And so Power BI is a tool that is going to allow your organization to be able to do this if you structure yourself in the right way to be able to do that, right? So this comes back to then breaking down the barriers like IT. If you're in first wave BI, then IT is going to be very, very circumspect about giving anybody access to data, because they're going to be like, oh no, I don't trust you to get the data right, and what about security, and you have all this kind of nervousness. And if you're in self-service BI land, then the analysts are going to be like, no, we can't let the executives build their own data. Like that's just like that's not what they do. And the executives might be like, no, there's no way I'm going to be doing data, right? And so there's going to be resistance at each one of these steps. And so think about that in the context of your own organization. Where are you at, do you think, and what would it take to be able to empower every single person inside your organization to be able to create their own dashboards and analyze their own data?